Okay, well, I want to welcome everyone here to the Baldwinsville School District. I'm Assemblyman Will Barkley. I represent this area and parts of Oswego County and north all the way to Jefferson County. I'm thrilled to see the great turnout that we have here, and I really appreciate many people that we have on our panels talking about an issue that we're certainly hearing a lot about. It's been in the news quite a bit, but we're obviously as representatives hearing a lot about it from parents, teachers, and administrators. And my goal, I'll just quickly say, out of this is really just to get information out of those people that are on the front lines with the Common Core. I have a fifth grader involved in the Common Core, so I guess I'm involved in it as a parent. But I really want to hear from the people on the front line to see what we can do, if anything, as legislators to either improve what's going on with the Common Core. If we can improve it, if it's possible to repeal it, whatever. My mind is completely open on this. So what I want to do, that's just a little, I just also want to thank the Superintendent Dangle for hosting this event for us too. Really appreciate doing this here in Baldwinsville. I'm going to pass the microphone over to my colleague, Ed Rod, who's a ranker on the Education Committee in the Assembly. He's going to tell you what he's been doing throughout the state, and then we'll let all of my colleagues have a few words before we start with the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Will, and thank you to all my Central New York colleagues for inviting us up this way to hear from all of you on this very important, timely issue. Myself and my colleague, my regular Al. This is the fifth of a series of forums we've been doing, hearing from parents, hearing from educators, hearing from administrators, just as to what's going on in schools with education reform, with high stakes testing, with Common Core, and basically we did two on Long Island, we did one on Staten Island, and now we're moving our way up. We were in Dutchess County last week, going from here to Buffalo and Rochester this week, and we're putting all this testimony together and hoping to be able to come up with some policy recommendations, legislative recommendations to really improve what's going on. And from my perspective, and I know Al's, one of our biggest worries is that we're going very far down the road with one size fits all that have the impact of hampering a lot of our districts from having local control, and as a result, teachers from having control over what's going on in the classroom. So, we're anxious to hear from all of you about what's going on in the local schools here. And with that, I will pass it back over to Bill so that my other colleagues can make some introductory remarks.
Thanks, Ed. Next is my colleague from Wayne County, Bob.
Thank you, Raul. I do represent Wayne County, the northern half of Cayuga County and western Oswego County, and just really pleased that so many people have taken time this evening to come, and hopefully, as Will Barkley mentioned, both to make comments perhaps or to become more informed. I spoke with someone outside who said, their purpose today was to listen, and that's my purpose as well, maybe to ask a few questions. But Will mentioned having a son in fifth grade. I have a son that's a teacher, and his wife is a teacher. And so whether it's your child being affected or it's your child who's trying to teach other children being affected, I think the Common Core issues and the way that we are moving forward in the state certainly has an impact. And so I appreciate everyone coming. I know we have a number of superintendents sitting in front of me who are going to be making some comments to us in a moment. But I'll introduce the person to my left, Assemblyman Gary Finch. Gary?
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to be very brief as well. In fact, I'm going to stand up because I feel like I'm sitting on the floor. I think the most important thing we do in New York State after we keep everybody safe is to educate our children. That is the number one concern of mine, and I think that should be all of our concern. I guess it is. You're here. It certainly raised awareness. Talking about education is something that we've been talking about on the Education Committee for years, but it seems to resonate now across the state. So definitely we're here to listen to you and to listen to your concerns in reference to the Common Core and how it's being implemented. And the fact that standards have been raised in New York State and now we're going to address them. So who are you to get today? All right.
Okay, then last is my colleague from Long Island, Al Graff, who's also a member of the Education Committee.
Thank you. Before I left Albany this time, in June, I put in a bill to withdraw from Common Core. I raised the time. And one of the biggest things we were looking to do was to get a conversation started. And from what I've seen, we've started a conversation throughout the entire state. I do have a degree in elementary education. I did take a look at the ELAs. I did take a look at some of the curriculum. And I'm very concerned with some of the stuff that we're forcing down the throats of our schools. So with that, I'm looking forward to listening to you. I'm looking forward to asking some questions once people start to testify. And again, we're going to be, a lot of this is being taped and a lot of it goes out on the internet so other people can see, we can share it with other people throughout the state. So I want to thank everybody who's on the list for coming today and giving us the ability to listen to you. Thank you very much.
Just a few more quick things. I also wanted to let you know, we invited people from the Department of Education to come. They weren't able to send anybody, but we also invited other local representatives, and I think there's representatives from both Assemblyman Sturpey and Assemblyman Magnarelli's office here, so we appreciate them coming here also. The only thing I would mention, we got a lot of people that want to speak, and obviously we have large panels here, so if we can just move things along. Obviously, we don't mind interactions from the audience, but anything we can do to provide due respect for those people that are here to testify would be greatly appreciated. So with that, why don't we start with our panel, and I want to thank you all for coming. The first panel we have is school administrators, and why don't I just quickly go down and introduce each of you, and then if you want to say a few words where you're from, when you say a few words to the panel or to us. Then first we have Nancy Ruscio, is that correct? Ruscio, I'm sorry, thank you for being here. Next we have David Scholes from Red Creek Central School District, Bill Lynch from Fulton, William Speck, Michelle Brandner, thank you, and Bob Pritchard. Thank you all for coming here today. Why don't we just start? Anyone wants to start? Well, here, you want? Yeah, you just got to grab it, Mike. Sorry about the sound system.
How's that? Is that good? We have
Why don't we switch on this?
Pull that over. As far as the goes.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank the Assemblyman here for the opportunity on behalf of all the panel and the folks who have share what we feel is a very, very important conversation. My name is William Speck. I've been the district superintendent of schools as a UN medical since now for 6 years. Prior to that, as an administrator and a teacher. I had a unique opportunity of also working in business and industry for a period of my life. So I think I bring a lot of both sides of the conversation to the table. I'm also a husband to a second grade teacher, so I hear a lot of things on the weekend and the evening. And I also have a 2-year-old granddaughter who will very soon be entering the doors of public education. So there's a lot at stake here, not only for me, but everybody. So I'd like to begin with a statement. Why the disruption of the status quo? I don't think anybody can avoid the fact that there is a new need for rigor, that in some essence, the demands that careers have been presenting, we have been falling a little bit behind in school. It's been very difficult for us to keep up. And that's not a blame statement. That's just a statement more that talks about the acceleration of change that's going on out in the world of business. Primarily driven by information technology. You can see the changes, how they've occurred, information technology advances, advanced manufacturing, work world, all the places that our students end up has changed dramatically. So the question is, do our schools mirror those environments? It is the Common Core way to get us there. U.S. students are falling behind students from other major industrialized nations, particularly in the areas of math and science, and we have plenty of research to back it up. And unfortunately, 30% of our students measured as proficient on the new assessments as they came through. And those assessments are calibrated for exiting skills and behaviors of students necessary to be successful in graduate. That is not another blame statement, but a statement of a time for us to look at the learning. These facts and others should serve as a wake-up call, not only for educators in the room, but for assemblymen, politicians, family members, members in the community, business, and industry. And the call is that something has to be done. Another fact is that too many of our college freshmen enter, I think the statistic is close to 30%, in need of remedial work. And that's work that they pay for that doesn't earn them credit towards graduation. You're going to hear in a few short minutes business and industry speak about the need for more rigor, higher levels of skill, and a workforce ready to take on all that comes forward. Recently, Condoleezza Rice, our former Secretary of State, stated in a conference that according to the statistics of the military has developed 30%, only 30% of our current population is military eligible, can be accepted into military service based on current standards for induction. That being the ASVAB exam that is now measured to a new level of rigor, the requirements of having a high school diploma, issues of obesity, mental health, criminal record, drugs, and alcohol. Only 30% of our current military age eligible citizens. So the issue is the need is now, and the message should be urgency. So what will the Common Core Learning Standards provide? First of all, they're going to help students gain the knowledge and skills that they will need to work at a deeper level. We're going to create opportunities for students to excel in reading, writing, speaking, listening, language, and math. And one of the most important things is to change the standards will bring about higher levels of critical thinking. It's going to allow teachers to focus on fewer critical concepts in math, but go deeper into application. Build students' abilities to apply what they have learned to the real world. And that's a piece that's been missing for very, very long, as far as I'm concerned. Real world application standards. It's going to allow students to communicate strong ideas and arguments in writing and react powerfully to what they read. One of the major shifts is in the area of ELA. Prior to the Common Core Learning Standards, 93% of ELA curriculum was based on fiction. 7% was non-fiction. Thus, we had many students entering the world of business and industry, very good at reading literature, but not too good at reading information text. The new Common Core standards break it down 50% on either side. And that should help tremendously as we move forward. The older standards that we were working with really were doing rote mathematical concepts versus the new standards that are much more problem-based. So there's been a lot of controversy, a lot of time in the news about the Common Core. And what I'd like to say is, what are some of the real problems? And they may not be in the Common Core. We might be better to stop the demonization of the Common Core, because who can really argue about rigor and look at the implementation problems that the state is faced. This is a big, big shift. And what I like to refer to is the Billy Fusilla method of bringing about education reform. If you're not around to come around here, Billy Fusilla's message is commonly saying it's huge. This is very, very big, and the pace is very fast. The second part of the issue is not only are we going forward with new standards, but we're also implementing a brand new way of evaluating teachers called APPR. So we have two things on this, not just one, two very large systemic changes that are hitting at once. And after decades of being handed mandates and being governed by SED regulations, now school districts were allowed to invent their own APPRs, negotiate them locally, and seek approval of these plans in what was a very brief period of time. So this past year has been very, very stressful, and the pace has been very rapid. In the end, we got it done, and we're moving forward. Has it been our best work? Many would argue, probably not. Are we going to be able to get refined and move forward? For sure. One of the big things is the curriculum modules. And you're going to hear a lot more from people today about the curriculum modules. They were coming very, very fast, and they were advanced in a fashion that really didn't give teachers adequate time to prepare for the Common Core. But they are here right now. There are many teachers doing some wonderful things with them. And the friction that we're hearing out in the media, the friction that we hear almost daily in many communities and schools, is the friction, I believe, of necessary change. And it's occurring in a very, very fast-paced journey. It's the discomfort of exercising new mental muscle needed to redesign how students will be prepared for their futures. And we know that in the middle of these times of reform, schools are facing budget reductions that are presenting significant challenges. So what should we do? My simple suggestion, I think we need to continue to dig deep to determine what the real issues are. And in many cases, we have to get away from the media spin on all that's going on. We do not avoid the realities and facts that are staring us right in the face. We have to look at the data. We have to look at it courageously. Our students need to learn differently, and they need to be challenged to higher standards. We have to be prepared to not run a sprint, but instead prepare for a marathon. And that's getting good at delivering the Common Core. It's going to take practice, time, intelligence, focus, and patience. This is not going to be about instant success. We need to learn and adapt each day to improve learning for each student. And critical, professional development needs to come to the table. We need to learn from each other. And in many ways, the powerful critical mass of 45 states working together has to be tapped. We have to examine efficiencies of our system on every level to affect positive change, seek extended learning time in environments of all parents, community members, and use resources wisely with direction and purpose. We need to look at data to make smart financial decisions. Gap elimination adjustment has been a big, significant player in all of the pressures that have been put on schools, and in many cases have dramatically reduced resources that could have been spent on pushing this forward. So we have to present real challenges to you folks, and I'm so glad to see you here, to ensure that understanding the financial needs of our districts to make proactive changes happen. You've seen the work that needs to be done, and you're very familiar with the reduction of the finances of our school districts. And understanding money is not always the answer, but without sufficient funding, this transition to higher standards will most likely fail. Professional development has to be supported. We have to keep it simple. We have to focus on the real work at hand. And this comes back to the mandate issues. We need mandate relief, we need mandate relief, and we need more mandate relief. Simplify our school system so that we can deliver the product necessary. A big thing is we have to support the remodeling of graduation requirements to allow for multiple pathways to build student intellectual strengths and interests. This gets back to the simplification of mandates. We need to build a vibrant workforce based on students' strengths, skills, and their ability to pursue graduation pathways that make sense for each and every one of them. And if there are no new dollars, then something must go. Something has to come off the table. So next steps, build unity and commitment for moving rigorous standards forward. Common Core is about preparing students for their future. Let's focus on the future. Let's not focus on where we are now or our past. We need an attitude that fixes problems, not fixes blame. And we need to seek solutions from our teachers in the trenches. Many of them are currently experiencing high degrees of success with what they are doing, and they are working hard to move forward. We need to celebrate our teachers. We need to ask them questions. We need to share their stories. We need to keep this dialogue moving forward. Let's get smart about the real issues, and I'm convinced that we'll get it down. Thank you.
I think what we'll do, if possible, we'll have you all speak, and then we can ask some general questions to the panel, if that's okay. The only thing I'd ask, if obviously we're going to be pressed for time because we have a lot of speakers, if you just keep your points, as short as possible, with getting your point across, obviously. At least what I'm really interested in, what specifics, if anything, we can do legislatively to either, feel like it's a complete waste to get rid of Common Core, or there's things we can do around the edges to at least improve the implementation. At least that, for me, is what I'm most interested in hearing. So, have at it.
Okay. Rather than read through the specific remarks, I'll offer some highlights and respond to any questions. I'm the legislative superintendent of both city schools. First of all, I do believe that the Common Core has value. It is something that we should be thoughtful about in terms of trying to improve the education of our students. I'd also like to remind everyone that since before I began in education, we have been successful as an educational entity in New York State. New York State learning standards that came out in the late 90s, we met the implementation of those, we met the revisions in 2005, and we continue to improve. And we've always responded, we've always worked constructively to do that. I think the Common Core does provide our students with the opportunity to be better prepared for whatever awaits them upon completion of high school. Education is the great equalizer, we all know that. Poverty is increasing within the state, we all have children who disadvantaged circumstances within our community. I think that this is something that will help leverage their opportunities. That being said, implementation is the what and how. Implementation, many of us has been a travesty. There's no good things, there's a rush. In fairness to our staff, they haven't had the opportunity to prepare the way that we would have liked and that they would have liked. And our children ended up, I don't think getting as good of an education as they could have had. We had more time to be more thoughtful with their work. SED has shifted their message over time from when the initial standards were adopted to the identification of building a curriculum-rich framework within New York State, and how the modules have rolled out. None of what was said and what has happened has really matched that. I think the intentions were good, the delivery has been a problem. And SED has really left the local school district explaining what's happening. There's a lot of information that posted on the website to some degree around the state, but it's been left to local school districts, it's been left to local boards, it's been left to teachers. And they are our face interacting with our community on a day-to-day basis. And you have to say that I have great regard for the professionalism of our teachers and principals for the circumstances they've been put in to carry on and move forward and to respond to parent concerns while also making sure they're taking care of our kids. We have to remember that we educate children first, and then second, in terms of what we teach. And we need to be thoughtful and vigilant in educating our whole child, and remaining cognizant of the qualities and attributes of what we see as an effective employee, a good neighbor, and valuing citizen. In terms of the challenges that go on, as Bill mentioned, finances are significant as we're trying to address the region's reform agenda here and the many facets from the Common Core to APPR and more effective use of data. Trying to do this at a time of going through a financial crisis and coming out of one has put all of us in a challenging position. We lack capacity in many ways in terms of time and resources, and also in terms of giving our staff the intellectual opportunity to delve into the Common Core, to delve into the aspects of the region's reform agenda to do it well. I do think that the implementation of the Common Core at the same time with the assessments and implementing the APPR has been a distraction and a detriment to the true cause that we're looking for as a student outcomes. With that, I'd like to say I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. We have a testimony and I look forward to the questions that you may have.
Work that I have pledged my life to do, which is to teach children and to support teachers in that work. My name is Michelle Brandner. I am the extremely proud superintendent of schools in Moravia. I have an incredible group of educators that have amazed me over and over and over again with the fabulous work that they're doing this very stressful time. I've been there for 5 years. This is my 5th year right now. Because my colleagues have done such a great job of kind of making the point of the fact that we do need standards with increased rigor, I can only add to that I'm a product of public ed in New York State. My 3 children are products of public ed in New York State. The standards that were used when I was taught as a student were more rigorous than the standards we had up until the Common Core. That might be shocking, but a lot of us watched the results come through of our state tests and thought, we cheered the fact that we were doing great and most of our students were proficient and so on and so forth. But we really knew in our hearts that some of the students anyway getting grades were not really what we would consider proficient. And we had concerns about their ability to function going forward. But that was the system that we had, and we certainly tried to challenge them and continue to help them grow, because that's what we do. I think part of the reason that this shift has been so incredibly painful is the fact that our standards have lowered, and there's lots of factors and reasons behind that. None of them are not well-intentioned, I guess is the best way to say it. But these standards are actually more rigorous than the ones that were in place when I was in school a long time ago. So I think that contributes to the first part of the pain. The other thing that I think has been a great source of angst for us is that while our middle and upper ed students are receiving the challenge that they need to achieve at higher levels, to go out into the workforce and to approach college with the necessary skills, there's a segment of our population that we live in terror that they are not being served. And Al spoke of this one-size-fits-all curriculum. I think that's part of the piece of it. So I'll just touch on the modules for a bit. We made a decision to implement the modules, K-12. And the reason that we did that is because we thought if the state is endorsing some pieces of curriculum, we must look at them if this is their interpretation of the standards because of APPR, and our teachers are going to be graded. And so the teachers agreed, we all decided this is something that we needed to do. As one of my colleagues mentioned earlier, there were some messages coming out of the state at that time, largely that we should implement the modules with fidelity. I heard that over and over and over and over and over and over again. Unfortunately, our interpretation of fidelity, and apparently the interpretation of fidelity by folks making the statements, seem to be different as of right now. And so we realized right away that these pieces of curriculum had issues. That's not to say that there is not a lot of great stuff in those curriculum modules, but when you're in a stressful situation, you realize, wow, there's issues here. It's very easy to want to, as I would call it, throw the baby out with the bathwater. So it's been extremely difficult to kind of stay the course and really look for the gems in the curriculum, and the gems are there. For example, 2 of my middle school teachers said to me, Michelle, this is powerful. The changes I'm seeing in my kids are dramatic and quick. They're much better writers, much better readers. And I wouldn't have put something this good together. And these 2 teachers that I speak of are amazing teachers. I thought they were amazing before they started doing this work. I'm a very hands-on leader. I work in the trenches with my teachers. I work with every single grade level in my school district. And I can tell you that while there are bad parts of the modules, we have the gift of these amazing educators, and those amazing educators hold the key to improve the state's interpretation, or whoever's interpretation of the curriculum. We have to give them the license. I've called it permission, because at the heart, teachers, even educators in general, even those of us that are a little rogue like myself, we all want to do the right thing. We want kids to flourish. We want kids to succeed. We live in fear that we will do something that will hurt them emotionally or academically. And so at the heart of it, when we're handed something, we feel like we should try to follow it. And unfortunately, when it's flawed, there's a big problem. So what have we been doing? We've been responding, because we are teaching children. We're not teaching modules. And that means that we take the wonderful things that the modules have to offer us. We laugh at the ridiculousness of first graders will do this activity in 2 minutes that will take 20, and we just realize that that's flawed, and we are problem solving. My community was upset, as most communities are. We had our own forum forum. I've been doing parent math workshops. I didn't ask any of my teachers to teach the math to the parents. My administrators taught math. So it gave us this wonderful opportunity to teach math and to learn, and my teachers didn't feel like they had to be on the firing line. The two other quick complications that I must add my exclamation point to, an additional layer that was added to complicate this change in the standards is the implementation of APPR. I'm certainly confident as a leader that using a common standard to evaluate teachers is not a bad thing. The conversations that I had with my teachers always have been rich. Maybe they're richer because there's more attributes I'm looking for, and they're looking at those attributes along with me. But having a system where they are graded, I can tell you, is not motivating. It's not motivating to teachers. And it gives them a fair amount of terror that someone can call up or stop by the office and get that grade, especially in light of the fact that teachers are taking the biggest challenge they may have ever taken. And what do we know about creating a safe environment for change? We have to create a safe environment. This is not a safe environment. And as much as I say to them, don't worry about the score, don't worry about the score, they're worried about the score. The last piece that I can tell you is that many of us are struggling to implement this reform agenda, especially after experiencing devastating cuts to our aid through the gap elimination adjustment. And I've spoken to Bob about this, I've spoken to Gary, I've spoken to Ed, so I know you've heard of it, I'll say it one more time. In my district alone, we've lost over $7 million over the past 4 years. It's really difficult to feel like I'm going to be around too much longer to do the fantastic work I'm doing in a community with 140 square miles. So we are collecting children from hither and yon. And so I fear that soon we will be instructionally and financially insolvent. So my hope is that in addition to all of the other things that you'll be pushing for, that you will reaffirm your commitment to eliminate gap elimination so that small rural school districts that are very negatively impacted will be able to continue to do their work.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much for allowing us to present our testimonies here this evening, and this is really important to us, and we value your time. My name is Dr. Robert Pritchard. I am the Superintendent of Mexico County Central School District. We agree with Commissioner King that we need to do a better job preparing our students for to be competitive in the global 21st century workplace. We get that. Our concerns with Common Core are largely centered on implementation and execution issues. My testimony this evening addresses the elements of the Common Core that foster student success, and then those elements that do not, those elements that need remediation. Some of the pros associated, and I won't elaborate too much further than what my colleagues have already done, but some of the positive features of Common Core. The state has done a very good job of providing us with information via the web, specifically engagenewyork.org, ppa.org, where videos and web-based information are provided to parents and educators to promote best practices in the classroom and at home as they relate to Common Core. As was mentioned earlier, the ELA and math learning modules are somewhat restrictive and turnkey in the sense that we were able to fly this plane while we were building it, although not, I know we've heard that metaphor often, and also not allowing a great plan to get away with a good plan. But further, these modules aren't perfect, and we do appreciate the flexibility that school districts have been allowed in order to adapt or create curriculum that is aligned with Common Core. How we achieve the standards should still very much be a matter of local control, and we feel that the adaptation of these modules or our own curriculum entirely has permitted us to be able to maintain that control. The Common Core learning standards themselves suggest a narrower curriculum that is rigorous and connected to international benchmark standards. These standards are designed to ensure that students leave school with the knowledge and skills they need to be successful in college and the workforce. So these are all pros. However, the great plan has yet to be realized. There are several cons and elements of the Common Core implementation that need to be remedied. First, school districts don't have management systems that can adequately handle the data required for teacher evaluations in support of Common Core implementation. These evaluation systems are a product of race to the top legislation. Burdensome APPR plans are labor and capital intensive, and school administrators lack the means to effectively implement these human resource controls. Secondly, student performance data needs to be available in real time in order to provide parents and teachers with the ability to immediately intervene and support struggling students. Automated student data collection, subsequent analysis, and related decision support tools need to be improved and deployed in our schools. Student information systems need to be adaptive, diagnostic, and prescriptive in accordance with student needs. The current system relies too heavily on less than timely, end-of-year, high-stakes tasks that may or may not be aligned with the standards, nor what was taught in accordance with vendor-driven learning models. The New York State assessments, as they are currently designed, seem to be better suited towards supporting teacher evaluation than they are supporting student mastery of Common Core learning standards. The current model for remediation or AIS academic intervention services is broken. Economically disadvantaged students within our schools are still marginalized. Remediation practices still stress homogeneous or tracked lower ability instructional grouping. The 2012-2013 New York State grades 3 through 8 assessment data indicate that over 70% of the students in Oswego County, where I am a superintendent, many of whom are economically disadvantaged, fail to meet an acceptable level of performance as defined by New York State Education Department. Most of our schools still lack the financial capacity to field rigorous, relevant 21st century academic programs. And if I could just sum up, again, we value the Common Core learning standards philosophically. We understand what they mean philosophically to our students, but there's still many hurdles that need to be overcome before we can effectively implement. The question persists. What is New York State Education Department's plan to better use data to improve instruction and identify student weaknesses? Testing and related accountability systems are seriously flawed to the point where decisions are based on invalid or less than timely information. Schools need real-time, teacher-friendly student information systems. These information systems can support instructional decisions made at the classroom level as they happen, as opposed to a high-stakes end-of-year assessment that may or may not be aligned with the Common Core. And then lastly, as I mentioned, districts lack the financial capacity to promote heterogeneous mixed ability instructional grouping and related AIS programming that promotes career and college readiness for all students, regardless of their zip code, level of economic advantage, or ability level. And that one size does fit. We are entitled in Mexico to have the very same opportunities that every kid on Long Island has. We suggest school aid formulas be reviewed and adjusted to make the situation more equitable and provide resources to the having uniform standards is commendable as long as our students have uniform access to an academic program that allows them to meet or exceed those standards. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Good evening. David Schultz, Superintendent of Red Creek Central School District. It's my 31st year in education, 14th as Superintendent of Red Creek. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity and start by saying that we all at this table believe that public education is the backbone of democracy and are glad that you're here listening to us. Some discontent over state ed policy. Past school year, we've been challenged to implement two huge initiatives, the Common Core and the teacher evaluation system. Both of these major initiatives were rushed and inadequately supported. The new teacher and principal evaluation requirements push schools to expand student testing. The SED developed curriculum modules that people have been talking about were delayed, flawed, and require much more time than schools have in their day calendar, and requiring implementation of full-scale Common Core and APPR in the same year was simply way too much for schools to handle. It would have been a lot better to get the instructional piece off the ground and start evaluating APPR so we could evaluate people on how they were delivering the new Common Core.
I'm a believer, I think all of us at this table are, that high expectations are relevant and very important, and the Common Core provides that. I guess what we're saying is right now is too much, too fast. As far as the APPR goes, the 60-20-20 system, 20% of that a teacher would either use a score given from the state, but most teachers don't have that, so that's where the student testing comes in. We found the 60% where it's principal observations of teachers to be very effective, and we think it's improving instruction. I would recommend that you look at the 20% that involves the SLOs and the extra student testing, and legislatively look to change that. Just, you have my testimony, so I don't want to dwell on everything, but to give you some recommendations, I'd recommend that the State Education Department defer any further new requirements or initiatives for 2 years to give us a chance to effectively implement the Common Core and APPR. Among the initiatives, we recommend deferring our adoption of value-added model and APPR, the PARC assessments, or the other computer-based testing, and passing scores for Regents examinations tied to Common Core expectations. Also, as far as legislative action, I would recommend that we invest in adequate professional development to implement the Common Core. I can tell you that my little small rural school district, we spent probably $100,000 in the past year, and we received about $16,000 from Race to the Top funds. That's about a difference of $80-some thousand, which is equivalent to 2% on my local tax levy. And of course, we have to abide by a 2% tax cap. I also would recommend that we ensure adequate state and federal funding to give all classroom teachers the tools, instructional materials, and technology they need to help all students meet the standards, including extra help for students most at risk of falling short of standards. I recommend that the governor and the legislature need to provide adequate funding for state education department assessment operations. New York has one of the highest per capita testing expenses in the country. I'd also recommend that additional legislative action may be justified following the comprehensive review we recommend. And of course, at the federal level, reconsider the requirement for testing every student every year in ELA and math in grades 3 through 8. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Nancy Ruscio, Superintendent of Homer Schools. And there are no perfect standards and no perfect curriculum. However, as an educator for 37 years and an administrator for 28 years, these are the best standards that I've seen. The lens I use for all the students I steward in public education is what I want these standards for my own children. I have 4 children. My answer is yes. The shifts of the Common Core, the standards, along with the much-needed shifts in instructional practice will make a difference between a lifelong learner and an unsuccessful learner who in the past just didn't get it, and American education just accepted. Some of the new graph, I did just recently read the bill that you introduced to completely stop the implementation of the Common Core. I'm probably going to be booed. However, I believe that would be a huge mistake, a huge setback for education for years to come. Yes, the implementation of several initiatives that my colleagues have mentioned has been very bumpy at best. And yes, the Board of Regents adopted the Common Core standards in 2010. However, the perfect storm occurred. The state-written curriculum in the form of modules was not available, and in some cases is still not available. Third-party materials aligned to those standards were also not available. as evidenced by the enormous investment by the state in vendor writing for modules. Well-written curriculum is not an easy task. The perfect storm hit when the state reduced funding to schools, the gap elimination adjustment. In Homer, we've lost $13 million in the last 4 years. Schools do not have the funds to pay teachers all summer to write well-written curriculum. So when the commissioner points to schools and says, well, the standards were adopted since 2010, and then schools and teachers were hammered in the spring of 2013 on the grade 3 through 8 assessments, it's just unfair. Every educator in my district and many districts are working harder than ever before. Limited resources of both money and time make the implementation very difficult. And unfortunately, children are very perceptive, and they do pick up on the stress of adults, educators, and parents. Undue stress hinders the learning process. One example is the Algebra 2 Regents is coming out in June. Educators are not going to see that assessment prior to it being administered. That's like asking them to trust the state. That's very difficult to do when there's errors in curriculum and assessments that are put out too fast, too soon, too quick. Teachers should know the end in mind of what they are training their students for, and they're not going to have that as an example. So trust is an all-time low. Add to that the challenges of APPR to curricular shifts, the lack of curriculum and funding, and it has been the perfect storm. It has created the fear. The commissioner states in a recent PowerPoint that state testing was less in the spring of 2013 than spring of 2012. That's true, it was minutes less. He blames districts that they have added testing to comply with APPR. That is also true, but good test construction is a complicated process requiring an understanding of psychometrics. Again, school districts do not have the expertise, resources, or time for test development, which the state required in the APPR. In addition, as some of my colleagues have mentioned, the truth is that the state is not working in tandem with numerous other federal mandates that do indeed require assessment, such as academic intervention services, response to intervention, Title I, or any other unique grants that districts are forced to seek in order to increase their resources because of the significant funding loss from Albany. There is too much testing for young children. I suggest the state submit another waiver to the Federal Race to the Top Commission to be able to reduce grades 3 through 8 testing by administering the ELA in grades 4, 6, and 8 on alternate years, and the math in grades 3, 5, and 7. As a district, we are trying to streamline as much as we can, but SED can work to help us as well. We owe that to our students and teachers. Lack of time and resources. Not all students will attend college. We need workers in some service areas that don't require college. However, we know from the workforce, students don't necessarily exit high school ready to work. Schools are very prepared to implement rigorous career pathways. Unfortunately, the current funding of schools prevents that from occurring. And the final thing that I'd like to mention is that there is significant concern by parents regarding privacy with in-bloom. It's true that districts have been sending their data to third-party vendors for many years. Each of those applications extract data that is sent and that has to abide by FERPA. However, the data that in-bloom brings all data together in one place adds a level of concern that colleges can see special education placement data on a student, and that may prevent that student from pursuing their dream beyond high school. I just had a mother tell me about her young child who has autism and has set the goal for himself that he is declassified by grade 7. His dream is to join the military. However, we know that the military doesn't accept children that have IEPs, and consequently, because they'll be able to see the data in this one-stop shop place that could hinder his ability to reach his dream. So I do object to the one-size-all mentality. All districts must select yet another vendor for InBloom. As a district, I'm telling you, we don't need it. We are quite satisfied with our current student management system, and it is able to provide the state and federal government with the reports that they need. We don't need yet another one, which in year 2 is going to cost $2 to $5 per student. We won't be purchasing it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate everybody's testimony. Now, if we could just have a few questions from the panel. Maybe I could just start off with a very easy one. Is any of your school districts doing their own curriculum, or is everybody on the state's curriculum? Or is anyone in Central New York doing that?
I'm doing the state modules, but we understand that curriculum is a local obligation. However, small rural, tiny school district, where are we going to get the funds to implement our own curriculum? We can't even keep up with the professional development required to implement the Common Core, much less the curriculum.
Is anyone in Central New York? You guys are?
Some departments, our high school English department, have recently begun writing their own version of modules. They agreed on their own time. They wanted to try it. They took a full day and did that on the holiday Veterans Day, and they thought they were going to accomplish a much greater amount of curriculum writing than they did. So it takes a lot of time. And, you know, there's 180 days in the school year, and we have about 4 professional development days, and the resources are tremendous that it would take to create what the state has already created for us, as bumpy and as difficult as some of those are.
Okay. Now, the first thing we heard was that our students are falling behind other countries, okay, academically. Which countries are we talking?
There's research available with the modern industrial nations of Germany, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, proportionally leading us in math and science.
Okay. And that, you know, we're falling behind our competitors. What are we competing with these countries economically? How are they our competition?
How are they our competition?
Yeah. Where are they our competition?
In globalized business.
Okay. And the other one's China. We keep hearing about China, right? Now, you understand that China doesn't use all of the test scores from all of their children, right?
Correct.
So that's like comparing apples to rocks, right? You've looked at the ELA. I've looked at the ELAs. Okay? Can anyone on this panel explain to me why a first grader has to point out ancient Mesopotamia on a map or a globe and discuss with me the contributions that ancient Mesopotamia has made to modern civilization?
Alan, I don't think they have to. I think, yeah, I know what's in the modules. I think that what we are charged with, I mean, as I said before, I have incredible people that can look at that and say, you know, that's not necessary. I think we were beat over the head with the point that we needed to include more nonfiction, and the K2 modules, the listening and learning strand, I think in some ways they went too far. And they're assessing, you know, we're using this for like a whole group reading block. I think the parts of it that are good is that we should be exposing kids to all kinds of topics because they're sponges at that point. But when it gets into assessing things that are really inappropriate to be assessed at that point, I think we have to make changes. I mean, I'm not making that. I'm not going to make them be assessed on can they locate ancient Mesopotamia on a map, but we do need to have a discussion about that, and those are things that we can either chuckle over, or we can say, we aren't going to do this. But the problem is, we did have a problem that existed, and how does this module, or domain it's really called, how does this domain inform a direction that we could take without being ridiculous?
Well, my concern with this was a lot of teachers, my understanding, the teachers were left out of this. Okay, the educators were left out of this when they were creating it. My other problem, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? When you teach to the middle of the class, okay? And then what you do is you'll give seat work to maybe reinforce it. You'll give the people that are a little higher, you know, that are a little more advanced, a little harder work to keep them engaged. But that gives you an opportunity to get to the kids that didn't get it and teach it to them in a different way. And what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from people out here is under this program, a lot of teachers don't feel that they have the ability to do that.
Yeah, I didn't stay with, I prepared a statement and then realized we were really going to run out of time if I talk about it all. But I think one of the issues is time, just take time in general. When you start adding, we did this exercise this summer with the teachers I was working with. Let's put the big rocks in the bucket. What is it that the state is telling us they would like us to accomplish? And what is it that we know in our hearts we need to accomplish? So one of the things that the folks that prepared these domains and modules didn't really talk about for a very long time was something called guided reading. Guided reading is pretty much a cornerstone of literacy skill development in young children, teaching them to read. And that goes on in our school district into the middle level, especially with our bottom 20% of our kids that are below grade level in reading still. So we decided we have to have a guided reading block. The modules do little to address writing. We have to do writing. And then we also said we need to have recess because little children need to run around. And so we made sure that rock in the bucket, the writing and the guided reading piece, and then we will make the appropriate modifications to this new thing that we were given that will provide students with patterned language that is of a high level, which they certainly can listen to and learn about and get excited about. The funny part is, my teachers will tell me, Michelle, some of this nonfiction stuff is killing me, but the kids love it. I mean, they are enjoying learning about human body and joints and ancient Mesopotamia, even though it seems like, why are we doing all of this? So I think it's a matter of modifying and not taking it too far and making sure that as districts, we don't forget that they're kids and we have to respond to that first.
Well, one of the things I'm looking at is trying to give you the ability to pull back, give you the time to turn around, and other states are pulling out of this right now, okay? I mean, Florida just pulled out of the testing portion, right? Not that long ago. Now, issues. Okay, let's go to the teacher evaluations, quick. Now, you were forced to do the teacher evaluations. You were forced to pay for it. How much did you pay for that? Do you have a number? And you were promised that you were going to get reimbursed for those teacher evaluations, correct?
Well, funding came through the general race to the top money that each district was allocated. And as Dave, you mentioned, your district got $16,000 net total package race to the top.
No, that's funding for this. I'm talking about the separate teacher evaluation from the governor. The governor told you to put the evaluations in place, don't worry about it, we're going to pay for it, and then he never put the funding in the budget.
No money for it.
Okay.
Didn't even know that there was money supposed to be coming.
Well, you would think, because you would make disappointment.
Well, I actually have a couple of questions, but I'll limit it to one at the moment. And it actually goes to Superintendent Scholl. You mentioned that, I think you listed several recommendations that you would make to the SED. Is there a plan of superintendents to come together, prepare some recommendations, and present them to Mr. King? And do you have a vehicle to do it with? Do you have a association or?
Yeah, we have a New York State Council of School Superintendents, and all the recommendations in my testimony, you should have a copy of, or we'll get a copy of, are read out of our Council of School Superintendents recommendations. So I believe the Commissioner is aware of those recommendations.
He's been made aware.
I believe so, I don't know that for a fact, but since we published it, I would think the higher ups made them aware. They're not a secret.
We don't know if we'll act upon them, or there's nothing that they can even review them.
I can't speak for the Commissioner. The history, from my perspective, is that SED, I'm going to use a word here, pretends to listen to us as school superintendents, but then none of our recommendations, or very few of them, are put into effect. And that's disturbing because we're kind of where the rubber hits the road, and we think that we could do this better. And that's why one of the recommendations was, let's put a moratorium on things for a couple of years, because we got more stuff coming down that's just going to be harder to handle. So if we can just grasp this Common Core and the teacher evaluation, and not have to deal with PARC and the computer-based testing and the region scores and the value-added model, it's going to be more effective. Our job would be more effective implementing the Common Core.
Well, perhaps this panel could be of assistance in bringing that forward to the commission. I have one more question, and it's sort of relevant to Superintendent Bradner and Stack. You mentioned the fact, the microphone is that there were going to be different pathways to graduation. Yet, the way I listened to this afternoon's testimony, there's pretty much one pathway at the moment. But I understand there's a large percentage of students that fall into a category that's somewhat above special ed, but yet still need assistance and may not be able to deal with this coursework. How are you going to deal with that particular group of students, which could be 10, 12, 15% of the student population? That could go to back and back.
Let me start. As a district superintendent, we sit and advise the Commissioner of Education and the Board of Regents on a regular basis. And one of the things that has been a continuing conversation, and it's primarily coming out of the needs of business and industry, is they need a prepared workforce. And the programs preparing students primarily immediately upon graduation, and in many cases as they go on for college, is this thing called career technical education. That's available both in component schools, but it's also available in the BOCES. One of the things that the Board of Regents is very interested in is clearing that pathway for a student, allowing the pathway to start much earlier than it is right now. But to do that, that's what I said before, something has to go. There's just too much on the plate as far as graduation requirements. And I think where the Board of Regents and the Commissioner are right now is they recognize the need. Commissioner joined us recently at Welch Allen, right here in Minneapolis, where over 30 business and industry people were telling me there's value to this work, there's good wages to this work, it is not dead-end work. Find a way to get kids to access to these training programs and post-education training programs. And it appears, to tell you quite frankly, that our Board of Regents is paralyzed in that because it's a political decision. That issue of something needing to go is where they get hung up. Until they can move forward and take something off the plate to allow kids to go that direction, they're going to be just hamstrung in the middle of these graduation requirements. Things that may be inappropriate for them or that they're not interested in. And there are good positions waiting for them.
The other thing I'll add, this is a little political alert. When Dave was speaking earlier about the Regents exam. So last year we suffered under having all of our teachers disheartened by the fact that our pre-grade test scores were terrible, right? So the good part about that is they aren't graduation requirements. That third grader will still graduate potentially, even if they got a 1 or 2 on the test. But we are about to enter into now realignment of Regents exams, and if the same thing happens with algebra and global studies and ELA, you will have massive numbers of students not graduating. And so you get to a point where then you have to decide, are the skills called for in the Common Core all necessary for all students? And that's a really touchy conversation to have, because how do you were talking about China earlier, that's a perfect example. We are compared with countries that weed kids out and send them into pathways. And that's not something that our country has been willing to do for a really long time. We've tried to educate all students. That's wonderful, but when we raise standards in this way, is there another pathway that could be created? Is there something that we can do that would be rigorous and meaningful to the direction that those students are going in? Or do all students need to pass the global studies Regents? Do all students need to be really good at making evidence-based claims and supporting it with evidence from multiple sources of text, if that's not what they're going to be doing when they leave? So I don't know the answer to that, but I am fearful as a leader to watch students standing waiting for a diploma and not having any because they can't pass loads of Regents exams, and it really changes the course of their life.
I'm just going to just add a comment. I heard politics and policy come in, and I think clearly the implementation of Common Core, and especially the APPR, politics got ahead of policy. And the push to do it came from different sectors, and who's implementing is different than who's pushing along the way. I agree. I know the comment was made, and I think this needs to come out. I don't think public scores for the APPR is going to improve education, and I think the state needs to deal with that. And the last thing that I've heard that I do feel somewhat good about it in my fear has been local implementation. We do so much from the top down, and I believe that every federal policy and every state policy is not what changes the individual student. It's the teacher and the school district that puts that together. And we need to, as a state, remind and make sure that if this is the course we're going, that we have that opportunity for local control as we go forward. Thank you.
Great. Well, again, we appreciate you coming in, and look forward to having a continued conversation as we go forward, and appreciate everybody's testimony.